So this morning we are in week 2 of our series we're titling First Words. And in this series we're looking at 7 specific things that Jesus said immediately after his resurrection. We believe these words are vital because while many of us believe that the resurrection happened, we often struggle to live into the reality that it created. These words are Jesus' way of coaching us into what that new reality means. You probably got a workbook this morning, and I want to make a little note about that. Our messages aren't going to be following those word for word. It's not going to be like a fill-in-the-blank thing. There might be spots for you to take notes during the service, but the main thing for that is to give you just some leading questions as you go out your week, kind of a step further outside of the morning. So make sure you take that with you and spend a little time with it this week and in the coming weeks as you reflect on the previous Sunday. So today, I get the privilege of looking at one of the longest, if not the longest phrase of the series, Mary. So I'm just kidding, obviously. So even though it's just one word, there's so much depth and weight that moment carried when Jesus said the word Mary. But before we talk about Mary, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about us. When someone asks, "Who are you?" how do you answer? If you're like me, I would probably give my resume. Say, my name's Chris, I'm 29, I'm married, I'm the executive pastor at a church in downtown Goshen, etc., etc. But it doesn't really say anything about who I am. There's nothing wrong with answering that question that way, but they're just facts about us, and we as humans have a habit of letting the labels or our situations define us. We describe ourselves through our circumstances. And over time, depending on how our lives go, we start to add layer on top of layer on top of layer. And if we're not careful, we end up just a shell or a mask of who we were created to be. So there's a question I'm going to keep coming back to all throughout this morning, and that question is this: what is naming you? Write that down. So would you turn with me to John 20? We're going to start at verse 11, and we're going to pick up with a woman named Mary Magdalene. She is going to the tomb where they laid Jesus after his death. This is the morning of the resurrection. So we're going to pick up in verse 11. It says, "Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw 2 angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying?' 'They have taken away my Lord away,' she said, 'and I don't know where they have put him.' At this, she turned and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?' Thinking he was the gardener, she said, 'Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will go get him.' And Jesus said to her, 'Mary.' She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, 'Rabboni,' which means teacher." That's where we're going to stop here. So a little bit about this Mary. Who was this Mary? It's not to be confused with Mary, the mother of Jesus. And I found out this week that apparently in the first century, about 25% of Jewish women were named Mary or Miriam. They were kind of interchangeable. So we don't know much about this Mary, but we do know a few defining characteristics and experiences that tell a piece of her story. And these characteristics informed the weight that moment when Jesus said her name, they informed the weight of that moment. And as we go through these different areas of her life, I'm going to ask you to look at yourself, and I'm going to ask you which layer do you most identify with? Which one are we allowing to name us rather than being named by Jesus? So the first we hear of Mary Magdalene comes from Luke 8:2, and it says that Jesus was traveling to towns and villages, proclaiming the goodness of God. The 12 disciples were with him, as well as some women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases. One of those women was Mary Magdalene. And it says that 7 demons had come out of her, that Jesus had delivered her from 7 demons. Now in the Bible, the number 7 comes up really frequently. And in that context, it often means it's a number of totality, the number of wholeness, of completion. And so in this instance, I don't think it's necessarily saying that there were 7 actual demons that came out of her, but rather that there was nothing left of Mary. Her identity was completely consumed by these demons. And we don't know anything about the circumstances or the history that got Mary into that moment, but we can guess that her history was one that was dark, it was difficult, and it was heavy. And piece by piece, it stacked up to completely overtake her identity. And her identity had become her history. So that's the first layer we're looking at, is history. So I'm going to turn this back on you. And I want you to be honest with yourself. Are you being named by your history? Oftentimes we go through circumstances that feel permanent. We experience things that give us a label. Has your identity been consumed or overwhelmed by names that are not your own? Afraid, anxious, stressed, successful, abused, undeserving. See, Jesus delivered Mary from complete torment, but her history would always inform her future. Now, Mary's life progressed from being a recipient of healing to becoming a provider. It says that she, along with these other women, supported Jesus' mission out of their own means. And based on her response to arriving at the tomb, we can kind of make another guess about just the way that Mary operated. She was presented with a problem when she arrived, which was an empty tomb, and her first instinct is to offer a solution or to move to the next task. It says, "Tell me where he is, and I will get him." We could say that she defaults to what she knows how to do to manage her pain. So this introduces the second layer we're looking at, performance. This layer affects us by looking at our present, what it is that we can do. And I want to be clear that there's no guilt in being useful or productive or performing well. Utility is an incredible way to serve God and to make a difference in the world around us. But where we get ourselves into trouble is mistaking our performance for belonging. As long as I'm useful, I matter. If I keep operating at this level, if I can just eke out a few more extra hours in my day, then I'll be good. Then we'll be set. But our performance becomes a safety net to keep us from being disposable. Sometimes that's to our relationships. Sometimes that's to God. So the questions I'm asking you this morning are you being named by your performance? Does your respect for others depend on their output, their performance, or their origin? If you were stripped of your ability to produce today, would you still feel that you deserved a seat at God's table? So we've discussed 2 layers, our history and our performance. And these affect us by looking at our past and our present. And they bury our identity under the weight of those things. But this third layer is different, and it's perhaps the most subtle and dangerous way our situation names us. It moves us from burying our identity to blinding our vision. And it's the layer of perspective. And what makes this so dangerous is that it limits our ability to dream. It forces us to limit the power of God to our current scenario rather than trusting the one who conquered all. So think about Mary's perspective at this moment. She's at the tomb. She's just lost the one person who delivered her from her dark history. She devoted her time, her money, her energy to him for years. And she had the opportunity of a lifetime to be a part of Jesus' ministry here on earth. And now, he's gone. It was all for nothing. They didn't just kill him, but they took his body. In Mary's world in this moment, her perspective is entirely defined by tragedy. So when she turns and sees Jesus, the Savior and King that she has been weeping for, she doesn't see a miracle. She sees a gardener. She sees a maintenance man. Why? Because when our reality is defined by a dead-end scenario, our expectations are limited to maintenance. If the story feels hopeless, we aren't looking for a resurrected king, we're looking for someone to help us manage the mess. This is how the layer of perspective names us. We begin to define the power of God by the boundaries of our current scenario. We can even have a healthy view of our identity. We can know we are loved, we are forgiven, but we still can put a ceiling on what God can do. We limit his influence to what we can see, what we can touch, and what we think is possible. When this happens, we stop dreaming. We stop dreaming of restoration because the divorce was final. We stop dreaming of purpose because the job is gone. We stop dreaming of freedom because the addiction has been with us for so long. And we start treating God like a gardener, someone who can maybe pull a few weeds or tidy up our lives. But he is the one who can bring dead things to life, who can heal the sick and the broken, who has crafted the earth that we are standing on in his own two hands. And we say, can you help me feel better? That's part of being human. I don't want to minimize. We are to communicate what we are feeling to God. But we are not to put boundaries on him. So the question I want to ask you is, are you being named by your perspective? Are the boundaries of your current scenario defining the power of God in your life? And have you stopped dreaming because you've decided that a gardener is the most that you can expect? Now we're going to go back to Mary. So like I said earlier, Mary was in the tomb. She was confused. She was grieving. She was numb. Maybe she's wondering if because Jesus died, that all of these layers that once consumed her identity will come roaring back. It says, then Jesus said to her, Mary. He doesn't give a command. He simply says her name. And so often, we underestimate the power of a name. There's this beautiful representation of this in a classic story, A Wrinkle in Time, that series. I don't know if you've read it or not. But in this book, there's this force that is named IT, capital IT. And what it is trying to do is to create a world where all living beings are optimized, they're efficient, and they're nameless. They have one purpose. The villain, it, strips away your individuality, your soul, until you are nothing but a rhythmic, mindless part of a machine. It tells you that you are only valuable if you are defined by what it says or the job it gives you. And the hero of this story, Meg, has to rescue her little brother from this force. And he's been overtaken by it. He doesn't know who he is. He's lost his memory. He's lost his identity. And she tries to reason with him and gets nowhere. She realizes that a weapon can't save him, but then she does something different. She calls out his name. She names him back into existence by loving him when he is lost. When we are named, we are given distinction. It pulls us out of all of those labels that whether we or the world puts on us. It separates us from everyone else who might have that label, and it makes it you. In that moment, when Jesus names Mary, it says that she turned. She turned away from the grave toward the one who named her. With that single moment, every layer that covered her name no longer identified her. She realized that she was more to Jesus than someone with just a dark history, someone who performed well, and someone whose perspective was bleak. She understood that those layers can inform who she is, but they cannot name her. And I believe that our experiences matter to God. We were never meant to just forgive, forget, and ignore our situations. But our experiences are meant to inform who we become, not identify us. So Mary's past with those 7 demons no longer identified her as broken. It informed her as someone who is grateful and loyal. Her capacity to perform no longer identified her as the one who must get things done, but it informed her as generous and helpful. Her perspective forever changed because she heard the voice of Jesus say her name. So I want to go back to the big question. What's naming you? Would you all stand with me? If you're feeling this morning like your past has given you a permanent name, I hope you hear Jesus saying that your history does not define you. It's the place where I have found you, but it is not where I will leave you. Your past will inform who you become, but it does not identify your worth. If you're feeling like you only belong if you are performing, I hope you hear Jesus saying, I see how hard you work. I see the ways you provide and serve my kingdom. It's a beautiful thing to want to make a difference, but I want you to know that you don't have to be useful to have a seat at my table. And if you're feeling like you can't believe in a better future, I hope you hear Jesus saying that you don't have to move out of your situation to find me, but know that I am the one who conquered all things of this world, even death. And I will never leave you or forsake you. Our situations inform our story, but they have no authority to name our soul. We spend our lives trying to convince the world that we are the layers that we wear. But the resurrection was a victory over every label that tries to bury us. When Jesus stepped out of that tomb, he left the power of your past, the pressure of your performance, and the limitations of our perspective in the dirt. And each of us, we're standing in our own garden today. And we have to decide who holds the pen to our name. Am I going to let my history write my next chapter? Am I going to let my performance define my worth? Am I going to let my circumstances shrink my perspective of what I believe God can do? The resurrection only becomes a reality when it becomes personal. Until we can attach our name, when we hear Jesus in that tomb, in the garden, saying, our name, your name. Only then does it move from just an event to being that he died, he was crucified, and he conquered death for you and for me. And just like Mary, Jesus is calling you by the name that you got before the world ever got its hands on you. And when he speaks, when he says that name, we only have one job to do. It's to turn. To stop facing the grave and turn towards the one who is naming us. Would you pray with me? God, I thank you for each person that is in the room this morning, that is within the sound of my voice. I thank you that you know our names, not the names that we give us, but who we really are. You see through all the pain, all the hurt, all the pressure, and all the performance, God. And sometimes we do everything that we can to try to ignore or cover up the sound of our name. And so may you right our perspective of who we are. May we turn towards you this morning. May we leave all other labels and all other names behind and step into the freedom of who you created us to be, God. Give us courage and grace this morning. If you need prayer this morning, we have a prayer team that's up here every weekend that would love to pray with you. It's no small thing to turn from our past, our present, or to change our perspective of our future. It's no small thing, so let us pray with you as you process that. We're going to continue worshiping with the Bethel students here. So sing with us.